My husband cheated on me with my mom. She didn't even apologize. Welcome back to Will I Be Happy, where we delve into the extraordinary twists of love, resilience, and all the messy moments that make life truly unforgettable. I'm your narrator, and this story is one for the ages. Before we get into this juicy tale, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. Meet Eugene, a strong-willed woman whose life takes an unexpected turn when she faces the ultimate betrayal by those she holds dearest. But instead of letting it shatter her, she embarks on a remarkable journey of empowerment. Let's get into the story. Under the vast canvas of the New Mexico sky, Eugene Blessing stood barefoot on her porch as the sun's first rays painted the horizon with hues of amber and rose. The scent of wild sage mingled with the cool morning air, embracing her like an old friend. She savored her coffee slowly, the rich aroma filling her senses. Her gaze rested on her 2-year-old son, Gabriel, who toddled through the dusty yard, giggling as he chased after elusive lizards. Her chestnut hair shimmered in the morning light, cascading over her shoulders like spun silk. Despite lingering fatigue from recent health struggles, a quiet strength shone in her emerald eyes, a resilience forged from life's unpredictable twists. "Morning, beautiful," came a low, velvety voice from behind her. She turned to see her husband, Benji Blessing, leaning against the doorway with a playful smirk. His dark hair was artfully tousled, and a hint of stubble traced his strong jawline. Even after all these years, the sight of him sent a flutter through her heart. "Well, aren't you up early?" she teased, a smile tugging at her lips. He sauntered over, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her close. "Couldn't let you enjoy this sunrise all by yourself," he replied, a subtle weariness in his eyes. She laughed softly, resting her head against his chest. "And here I thought you only got up this early for bacon." "Maybe I just needed a better reason," he said, a hint of a smile in his voice. Eugene tilted her head, noticing the shadows beneath his eyes. "Everything okay? You seem tired." He shrugged, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. "Just a lot on my mind lately." She squeezed his hand gently. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" "Yeah, I know," he murmured. "Maybe later." Their moment was interrupted by Gabriel's gleeful shriek as he stumbled and landed in a puff of dust. Eugene pulled away, her maternal instincts kicking in. "Hold that thought," she said, moving to scoop up their giggling son. Benji watched them, a mixture of love and something wistful clouding his expression. "I've got to head out soon," he said reluctantly. "Early shift at the plant." She glanced back at him, a hint of disappointment flickering in her eyes. "Again? You've been pulling a lot of extra hours lately." He avoided her gaze, shuffling his feet. "They're short-staffed. Besides, the overtime helps." Eugene studied him for a moment, sensing an undercurrent she couldn't quite place. An uneasy feeling tugged at her, but she brushed it aside. Before she could probe further, he pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. "Don't worry," he assured her. "I'll be back before you know it." She nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "Be careful out there." As Benji disappeared inside to get ready, Eugene's gaze drifted across the open landscape. The morning light danced across the desert, but a shadow lingered in her thoughts. Something felt different, like the stillness before a storm. She couldn't shake the feeling that change was on the horizon, though she had no idea just how much it would alter the course of her life. Later that morning, Eugene busied herself in the kitchen. The aroma of freshly baked bread filled the house, mingling with the soft strains of a tune playing on the radio. She tried to ignore the nagging unease settling in her chest. Her mother, Adina Armstrong, emerged from the basement where she had been staying temporarily. Adina was a vision of timeless beauty, her auburn hair perfectly styled, her attire impeccable even in a casual setting. She moved with a grace that belied her age, commanding attention without effort. Something smells divine, Adina remarked, her eyes scanning the kitchen appreciatively. Just a little something for lunch, Eugene replied, wiping her hands on a towel. I thought we could have a picnic outside. Adina smiled faintly. Sounds lovely, though I won't be able to join you. I've got some errands to run in town. Eugene tried to hide her surprise. I thought you were taking some time off work. Oh, you know me. Adina waved a delicate hand. Can't sit still for too long. Besides, I have a few things to sort out. A hint of secrecy laced her words, stirring Eugene's curiosity. Everything okay? She asked, trying to sound casual. Just tying up some loose ends, Adina replied, avoiding her gaze. All right then, Eugene said, deciding not to press further. Maybe later we can have that mother-daughter chat we've been meaning to have? Adina's expression flickered for a moment before she nodded. Of course, dear. We'll find time. As her mother gathered her things and headed out, Eugene couldn't help but feel a pang of loneliness. Despite living under the same roof, a distance had grown between them, an unspoken barrier she longed to dismantle. The afternoon sun was high when Eugene settled on a blanket under the shade of a mesquite tree. Gabriel nestled beside her. She watched him play with his toy trucks, his innocent laughter bringing a smile to her face. Her phone buzzed, breaking the tranquil silence. She glanced at the screen. No message, just a low battery warning. Sighing, she set it aside, closing her eyes to soak in the warmth and the gentle rustle of leaves. A soft breeze carried the faint sound of a vehicle approaching. She sat up, shielding her eyes against the glare. In the distance, Benji's truck kicked up dust along the dirt road. That's odd, she murmured. He's home early. Gathering Gabriel in her arms, she made her way back to the house just as Benji pulled into the driveway. He stepped out of the truck, his expression unreadable. Everything okay? She called out, a note of concern in her voice. He hesitated before offering a tight smile. Yeah, just a slow day at work. Thought I'd cut out early. Eugene studied him, noticing the tension in his posture. Well, I'm glad you're home. We were just having a little picnic if you'd like to join us. Maybe later, he replied, rubbing the back of his neck. I need to take care of a few things first. Before she could respond, he had already moved past her, heading inside the house. Confusion knitted her brow. An uneasy feeling settled deeper within her. Something was definitely off. That evening, after putting Gabriel to bed, Eugene found Benji sitting on the porch, a bottle of beer in his hand. The stars began to dot the sky, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of night-blooming flowers. Mind if I join you? She asked softly. He glanced up, his eyes reflecting the pale moonlight. It's your porch too, he said quietly. She sat beside him, the silence stretching between them like a vast chasm. Do you want to talk about it? She ventured. About what? He replied tersely. Whatever's bothering you, she pressed gently. You've been distant lately. He took a long swig of his beer, gaze fixed on a distant point in the darkness. Just tired, I guess. Eugene reached out to place a hand on his arm, but he flinched ever so slightly, and she withdrew. Benji, if something's wrong, you can tell me. He sighed heavily, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Not tonight, Eugene, please. Her heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. All right, she whispered, but I'm here when you're ready. She stood to leave, pausing at the doorway. I love you, she added softly, hoping to bridge the growing gap between them. Yeah, he murmured without looking at her. Me too. Eugene lay awake in bed, the ceiling fan casting shifting shadows across the room. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her, each tick of the clock amplifying her unease. Her thoughts drifted to her mother. Adina's sudden errands, her evasive answers. There was a time when secrets didn't exist between them. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Eugene resolved to have that long-overdue conversation with her mother tomorrow. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the curtains, she finally drifted into a restless sleep, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. A storm that would soon upend her world in ways she couldn't fathom. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across the dusty roads as Eugene drove home from the grocery store. The air was thick with the scent of impending rain, a rarity in the New Mexico desert. She hummed along to a song on the radio, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in her stomach over the past few days. As she turned onto the gravel driveway leading to their home, she noticed her mother sitting on the porch swing. Adina's posture was tense, her usually flawless appearance slightly disheveled. Eugene's heart skipped a beat. It was unlike her mother to appear anything less than impeccable. Stepping out of the car, Eugene called out, "Mom, is everything okay?" Adina looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. "We need to talk," she replied, her voice steady yet laden with gravity. Eugene approached cautiously, setting the grocery bags on the porch. "You're scaring me. What's going on?" Adina took a deep breath, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the horizon. "It's about Benji." A chill ran down Eugene's spine. "What about him?" Adina hesitated. I think he's been unfaithful to you." Eugene stared at her, disbelief clouding her features. "What are you talking about?" "I've heard rumors," Adina said carefully. "People have seen him with other women. I didn't want to believe it, but I thought you should know." Eugene shook her head, her hands trembling. "No, that can't be true. He wouldn't do that to us. To Gabriel." "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Adina said softly, reaching out to touch her arm. "I thought you deserved to know." Pulling away, Eugene felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Fear, anger, confusion. "Why are you telling me this now?" Adina's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Because I can't stand to see you in the dark." Eugene's mind raced. The late nights, the distant looks, the evasive answers. It all began to form a disturbing picture. "I need to hear it from him," she declared, grabbing her keys. "Maybe you should wait," Adina began. But Eugene was already moving. "No, I need to know." The drive to the meatpacking plant was a blur. Her heart pounded like a wild drum in her chest. As she pulled into the parking lot, she spotted Benji's truck parked near the entrance. Without hesitation, she marched inside, her resolve unshaken. Workers glanced up as she passed, sensing the storm that followed her. She found Benji in the break room, his back to her as he poured a cup of coffee. "Benji!" she called out, her voice echoing in the sterile room. He turned, surprise flickering across his face. "Eugene, what are you doing here?" She closed the distance between them, eyes blazing. "Is there something you need to tell me?" He frowned, setting down his mug. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "I've heard about the other women, about your affairs." His expression shifted from confusion to a guarded mask. "Who told you that?" "Does it matter?" she retorted. "Is it true?" He hesitated, a shadow passing over his features. "Eugene, it's not that simple." Her voice rose, laced with frustration and hurt. "So it's true? You've been seeing other women?" He looked away, guilt etched on his face. "Yes, but it's not because I don't love you." She stared at him, disbelief mingling with anguish. "How can you say that?" He ran a hand through his hair, his composure unraveling. "Ever since Gabriel was born and you got sick, things have been different between us. I felt lost, disconnected." Eugene's eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't you talk to me? I was right here, Benji." "I tried," he whispered, pain evident in his voice. "But every time it seemed like you were miles away. I didn't want to burden you when you were already dealing with so much." She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "So you turned to other women." He met her gaze, eyes pleading. "I made mistakes. I was looking for comfort, for someone to understand what I was feeling." "I can't believe this," she said, her voice trembling. "Who were they?" He hesitated, then blurted out, "I don't understand why your mother told you about us." Eugene blinked, confusion furrowing her brow. What did you just say? Realizing his slip, Benji's eyes widened. Eugene, my mother told me about your affairs, she clarified slowly, dread creeping into her voice. What do you mean, about us? He swallowed hard, panic flashing across his face. I thought she already told you everything. A cold chill settled in Eugene's stomach. Told me what, Benji? He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. About me and your mother. Her world tilted, the air thick and suffocating. You and my mother, she whispered, each word heavy with disbelief. It just happened, he said weakly. We didn't mean for it to go that far. Eugene felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet, leaving her in free fall. My own mother, she whispered, horror and betrayal washing over her. How could you both do this to me? I'm so sorry, Benji said, tears welling in his eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I was confused and hurting myself. That's no excuse, but it's the truth. She took a step back, shaking her head as her vision blurred. I can't listen to this anymore. Eugene, please, he implored, reaching out to her. I want to make things right. I still love you. She held up a hand to stop him. You should have thought of that before. Her mind swirled with fragments of conversations, lingering glances, unexplained absences. The puzzle pieces snapped into place with horrifying clarity. Without another word, she turned and fled, ignoring his calls. She pushed past curious onlookers, the walls closing in around her. The hot desert air hit her like a wave as she stumbled outside. Reaching her car, she fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She drove away, the landscape speeding past in a blur of sand and scrub. How could the two people she loved most in the world betray her so deeply? Hours later, Eugene found herself parked at a secluded overlook, the vast desert stretching endlessly before her. The setting sun bathed the landscape in shades of fiery orange and deep purple, mirroring the turmoil within her. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Calls and messages from Benji and Adina, but she ignored them all. She needed time to process, to breathe. As dusk settled, painting the sky with stars, Eugene made a silent vow. She wouldn't let this break her. The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing. She deserved better than lies and deceit. Determined to confront the truth head-on, Eugene pulled into her driveway as the late afternoon light cast a golden glow over the desert. The familiar sight of her quaint house did little to soothe the storm raging within her. Pushing open the front door, she was met with the aroma of freshly baked bread. Adina stood in the kitchen, humming softly as if nothing had happened. The normalcy of the scene ignited a fresh wave of anger in Eugene's chest. "Mom!" Eugene called out, her voice strained. Adina turned with a radiant smile. "You're just in time, sweetheart. I made your favorite. Sourdough with rosemary." Eugene clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. "We need to talk." Adina's smile faltered for a split second before she composed herself. "Of course, but first, let's sit and have a slice while it's warm." "No," Eugene snapped, her tone sharper than she intended. "This can't wait." Adina arched an eyebrow, feigning confusion. "Is everything all right?" "Stop it," Eugene hissed, her eyes flashing with hurt. "I know about you and Benji." A tense silence settled between them. Adina's eyes flickered with something. Fear? Guilt? But she quickly masked it with a placid expression. "I'm not sure what you mean." Eugene took a step forward, her voice low and steady. "Don't play dumb. He told me everything." Adina turned away, busying herself with arranging the bread on a cooling rack. Her hands trembled ever so slightly. He must be mistaken. Mistaken? Eugene's voice rose, incredulous. "About sleeping with my mother." Adina's hands stilled, but she didn't face her daughter. "Eugene, darling, you're upset. Let's not say things we'll regret." "Regret," Eugene echoed bitterly. "The only thing I regret is trusting you." Adina finally turned to face her, her gaze steady but cold. "I think you need to calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down." Eugene's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "How could you do this to me? To your own daughter?" Adina sighed softly, a hint of exasperation in her tone. "Eugene, you're being dramatic. Whatever Benji told you, he's confused." Confused. Eugene let out a hollow laugh. "He confessed, Mom. He admitted to the affair." Adina stepped closer, her expression softening into feigned concern. "Sweetheart, men say foolish things when they're under pressure. He's probably trying to deflect from his own mistakes." Eugene recoiled, the last threads of her patience snapping. "You're unbelievable. You're standing here lying to my face, acting like everything is fine." "Because it is," Adina insisted, reaching out to touch her arm. "You're letting your imagination run wild." Eugene pulled away sharply. "Pack your bags." Adina blinked, a flicker of irritation crossing her features. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Eugene said firmly. "I want you out of my house. Tonight." Adina's eyes narrowed, a steely edge entering her voice. "This is my home too." "Not anymore," Eugene replied, her resolve unwavering. "You lost that privilege the moment you decided to betray me." Adina straightened her posture, lifting her chin defiantly. "I think you're overreacting. You need me here, especially with Gabriel." "Don't you dare bring Gabriel into this!" Eugene snapped. "We'll be just fine without you." A tense silence enveloped them. Adina studied her daughter, a mix of annoyance and something akin to pity in her gaze. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you," Eugene retorted. Adina shook her head slowly. "I hope you realize how unreasonable you're being." "Unreasonable?" Eugene's temper flared anew. "You slept with my husband and I'm the one who's unreasonable?" Adina sighed, her facade cracking ever so slightly. "You're determined to believe the worst of me. I can't change that." Eugene took a deep breath, her voice steadying. "Please, just go. I can't look at you right now." Adina's lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well, if that's what you want." "It is." Without another word, Adina turned and ascended the stairs, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. Eugene watched her go, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over her. The woman who had been her confidant, her support, had become a stranger. An hour later, Adina descended the stairs, a suitcase in hand. She paused at the bottom, casting a long look around the living room adorned with family photos and mementos of happier times. Eugene stood by the doorway, arms crossed. "Do you need a ride?" she asked flatly. "I'll manage," Adina replied, her tone equally devoid of warmth. As she moved toward the door, she hesitated briefly. "Eugene, Save it," Eugene cut her off. "I don't want to hear any more lies." Adina's eyes flashed with a fleeting sadness before hardening. "Very well, goodbye." She stepped out into the fading light, the door closing softly behind her. Eugene released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The silence of the house was deafening, each tick of the clock amplifying the emptiness. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. The weight of the day's events pressed heavily upon her. A soft cry from Gabriel's room pulled her from her despair. Wiping her eyes, she stood and made her way to her son's room. Gabriel stood in his crib, his little hands gripping the rails as he looked up at her with innocent eyes. "Mommy?" he mumbled sleepily. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, lifting him into her arms. "Did you have a bad dream?" He nestled against her shoulder, his tiny fingers clutching her shirt. "Stay." "I'm right here," she assured him, kissing the top of his head. As she rocked him gently, Eugene felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't alone. She had Gabriel, and he needed her strength now more than ever. The next morning, the house felt different. Quieter, yet somehow lighter. Eugene moved through her routine, determined to keep things normal for Gabriel's sake. Midway through breakfast, a knock sounded at the door. Her heart lurched, half expecting to see Adina's remorseful face. Steeling herself, she opened the door to find Benji instead. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes betraying a sleepless night. "We need to talk," he said softly. Eugene considered closing the door but refrained for Gabriel's sake. "There's nothing to say." "Please," he implored, his voice strained. "Just give me a chance to explain." She hesitated before stepping aside. 5 minutes. He entered cautiously, glancing around as if expecting Adina to appear. "Where's your mother?" "Gone," Eugene replied curtly. "I asked her to leave." Benji's shoulders sagged. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen." She crossed her arms, her gaze piercing. "Then why did it—" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I don't know. It was a mistake. A horrible mistake." "A mistake?" she echoed bitterly. "You don't accidentally fall into bed with someone." "It wasn't like that," he protested, desperation creeping into his voice. "I was confused and she was there." Eugene shook her head, her expression hardened. "That's no excuse. I know," he admitted, his eyes pleading. "But I want to make it right." She met his gaze, the hurt evident in her eyes. "And how do you propose we do that?" He stepped closer, reaching for her hand. "We can work through this, for Gabriel's sake." She pulled back sharply. "You shattered my trust, Benji. I don't know if that's something we can fix." He swallowed hard, tears glistening in his eyes. "I love you, Eugene. Only you." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Funny way of showing it. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Just give me a chance." She regarded him silently, conflicting emotions warring within her. Part of her longed to believe him, to rebuild the life they had. But the wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. "I need time," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "Time to think, to figure out what's best for me and Gabriel." He nodded slowly, defeat etched on his face. "I understand. I'll give you space." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry." She closed the door behind him, leaning against it as a solitary tear traced down her cheek. Forgiveness wasn't a door she could easily reopen. Days stretched into weeks, each one a challenge as Eugene navigated her new reality. She busied herself with caring for Gabriel, hoping the routine would distract her from the gnawing pain of betrayal. But just as she began to find a semblance of stability, a new twist threatened to unravel her fragile peace. One afternoon, as the sun cast soft shadows across the living room, the doorbell rang. Wiping her hands on a dish towel, Eugene opened the door to find her grandmother, Bimini, standing on the porch, dressed impeccably in a lavender suit, her silver hair pulled back into an elegant chignon. Bimini exuded an air of calm authority. "Grandma Bimini," Eugene greeted with surprise. "What brings you here?" Bimini offered a gentle smile. "May I come in, dear? We need to talk." Eugene settled into the worn leather armchair across from Bimini, who sat gracefully on the floral-patterned sofa. The soft glow of the fireplace bathed the room in warmth, contrasting with the chill that had settled in Eugene's heart. Bimini broke the silence, her voice gentle yet firm. "Eugene, I've been worried about you. How are you holding up?" Eugene managed a faint smile. "Taking it one day at a time." Her grandmother nodded thoughtfully. "I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you. Betrayal cuts deep, especially from those we hold dearest." Eugene's gaze dropped to her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's like my whole world has been turned upside down." Bimini leaned forward, her eyes filled with empathy. "I want you to know that I'm here for you, not to defend anyone, but to support you in whatever way I can." Eugene looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. "You're not here to convince me to forgive Mom." Bimini sighed softly. "Forgiveness is a personal journey, one that can't be rushed or forced. Your mother is my daughter and I love her, but that doesn't mean I excuse her actions." A weight lifted slightly from Eugene's shoulders. "Thank you for understanding." I've spoken with Adina, Bimini continued. She's struggling to face the reality of what she's done. Denial is a powerful shield, but it can't hold forever. Eugene's expression hardened. She needs to take responsibility. I agree, Bimini said gently. But whether she does or not, you need to focus on healing yourself. Don't let her inability to admit the truth keep you trapped in this pain. Eugene considered her words, a flicker of hope igniting within her. It's hard to move forward when there are so many unanswered questions. Perhaps seeking those answers from within will bring you more peace than expecting them from others, Bimini suggested. Eugene met her grandmother's eyes, seeing wisdom and love reflected there. Maybe you're right. Bimini reached out and squeezed Eugene's hand. You're stronger than you realize, and whatever you decide, know that you have my unwavering support. That evening, Eugene sat on the porch swing, watching Gabriel chase after fireflies as dusk painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold. The gentle creak of the swing was a soothing rhythm against the backdrop of Cicada's evening song. The sound of approaching footsteps drew her attention. Bimini climbed the steps to the porch, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lanterns. It's a lovely evening, isn't it? Eugene smiled faintly. It is. Gabriel's determined to catch every firefly out there. Bimini chuckled softly. Ah, the boundless energy of youth. They sat together, silence wrapping around them like a comfortable shawl. After a moment, Bimini spoke softly. I've been thinking about you. All good thoughts, I hope, Eugene replied lightly. Mostly, Bimini said with a gentle smile. I wanted to share something with you, something from my past. Eugene turned to her, curiosity piqued. What is it? Bimini gazed out into the darkening landscape. When I was about your age, I faced a betrayal that shook me to my core. Someone I trusted deeply hurt me in a way I never expected. Eugene listened intently, sensing the gravity of her words. It took me years to come to terms with it, Bimini continued. I held on to anger and resentment, thinking it protected me, but in reality, it only held me back. What did you do? Eugene asked softly. I chose to let go, Bimini said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. Not for them, but for myself. By releasing the hold the past had on me, I could embrace the future with open arms. Eugene absorbed her grandmother's confession, understanding dawning in her eyes. Are you saying I should forgive Mom? Bimini shook her head gently. I'm saying you should do what's best for your peace of mind. Forgiveness isn't about absolving others. It's about freeing yourself. Eugene sighed, her gaze returning to Gabriel as he finally caught a firefly, his face lighting up with pure joy. It's hard. Every time I think about it, the pain feels fresh. I know, Bimini acknowledged. Healing is a journey, not a destination. But remember, you're not alone. I'm here to walk alongside you, whatever path you choose. A tear slipped down Eugene's cheek. Thank you, Grandma. Your support means the world to me. Bimini wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You're a remarkable woman, Eugene. Your strength inspires me. They sat together, the silence filled with unspoken understanding. Eugene felt a small spark of hope ignite within her, a sign that perhaps, with time, she could find her way through the darkness. The idea lingered with Eugene long after Bimini left. Could letting go bring the peace she so desperately sought? That night, she lay awake, the ceiling fan casting swirling shadows above her. Memories of happier times with Benji flooded her mind. Their first date under a starlit sky. Whispered promises of forever, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. Determined, Eugene reached for her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found his number. Her finger hovered over the call button. Hesitation gnawing at her resolve. Taking a deep breath, she pressed it. The phone rang several times before a familiar voice answered. Hello? Benji, it's me. A pause. Eugene, it's been a while. It has, she agreed, her voice steady. I was wondering if we could talk. He hesitated. Is everything okay? Is Gabriel? Gabriel's fine, she assured him. This is about us, about the past. He exhaled softly. All right, when and where? They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. The next afternoon, Eugene arrived early, choosing a secluded table near a window overlooking the desert expanse. She fidgeted with her necklace, nerves tingling under her skin. Benji entered shortly after, his presence still commanding despite the years apart. His dark hair was slightly longer, streaks of silver at the temples adding a distinguished air. As he approached, their eyes met, a mixture of nostalgia and uncertainty passing between them. Thanks for coming, Eugene offered as he sat down. He gave a small, tentative smile. I was surprised to hear from you. She clasped her hands together on the table. I won't take up much of your time. I just need answers. He nodded slowly. I understand. Back then, she began, choosing her words carefully, you told me you and my mother had an affair. Yes, he affirmed, his gaze steady. She still denies it, Eugene continued. Claims it was nothing more than hand-holding. Benji scoffed lightly. Hand-holding? That's a convenient understatement. Tell me everything, she implored, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to know the full truth. He leaned back in his chair, a shadow crossing his features. Eugene, rehashing the past won't change what happened. Maybe not, she conceded. But it might help me move on. He studied her for a moment before taking a deep breath. You deserve the full truth. Eugene nodded, bracing herself. Go on. After Gabriel was born and you got sick, I felt helpless, he began. I wanted to be strong for you, for our family. But inside, I was falling apart. I didn't know how to handle seeing you suffer. She listened silently, her gaze unwavering. Your mother was around a lot, helping out, he continued. At first, she was just someone to talk to. She understood what I was going through. What we were going through, Eugene corrected gently. You could have talked to me. I know, he admitted, pain evident in his eyes. But I felt like I had to be the rock, and I didn't want to burden you with my fears. Adina saw through that. So you confided in her instead, Eugene said, a hint of bitterness in her tone. He nodded. It was wrong. I blurred the lines between seeking support and seeking something else. She made me feel understood, but it was a selfish escape from facing our problems. Did you ever think about how it would affect me? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. Every day, he said softly. Guilt ate at me, but I was too cowardly to face it. When you confronted me, it was almost a relief to have it out in the open, but then your mother denied everything, and I didn't know what to do. You could have told the truth, she said firmly. I was afraid, he confessed. Afraid of losing you, of destroying your relationship with your mother. I handled everything poorly. Eugene sighed, a mix of anger and exhaustion washing over her. And now? What do you feel now? He looked into her eyes, sincerity shining through. Regret. I lost the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too weak to deal with my own emotions. I've spent years reflecting on my mistakes. Have you learned from them? She asked, her expression softening ever so slightly. I hope so, he replied earnestly. I've been going to therapy, trying to understand why I made those choices. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry. She considered his words, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. Thank you for telling me. You deserved honesty, he said quietly. Yes, I did, she agreed. We all make mistakes, but it's how we face them that defines us. He nodded, a hint of relief in his expression. I wish I could go back and do things differently. We can't change the past, she said gently, but we can learn from it. A quiet moment passed between them, a semblance of peace settling in. I hope you find happiness, Eugene, he said sincerely. You too, Benji, she replied. Take care of yourself." They parted ways amicably, a sense of closure settling over Eugene like a comforting blanket. As she drove home, the twilight sky painted with streaks of lavender and gold, she felt the first stirrings of hope flutter within her chest. Weeks turned into months, and Eugene began to rebuild her life with renewed vigor. She threw herself into her work, channeling her experiences into a newfound purpose. The idea of helping others who had faced similar betrayals ignited a passion within her. One evening, as the stars twinkled above, Eugene sat with Gabriel on the porch, reading him a bedtime story. His sleepy eyes fluttered as he nestled against her. "Mommy," he mumbled drowsily, "are you happy?" She smiled tenderly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm getting there." "Good," he whispered before drifting off to sleep. Cradling him in her arms, Eugene felt a surge of determination. The scars of her past would always be there, but they no longer defined her. She was more than the sum of her hardships. Inspired by her journey, Eugene began laying the groundwork for a nonprofit organization aimed at supporting single mothers. She envisioned building small homes, sanctuaries where women could find solace, rebuild, and thrive. As news of her initiative spread, volunteers and donations poured in. The process wasn't easy. There were setbacks and challenges, but Eugene's determination never wavered. The first house was completed within months, a modest but welcoming space that symbolized hope and new beginnings. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by friends and supporters, Eugene felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Maya, her ever-loyal confidant, embraced her warmly. "You did it!" Maya exclaimed, her eyes shining. "I'm so proud of you." Eugene grinned, her heart light. "I couldn't have done it without everyone here." Later, as the celebration continued, Eugene spotted a familiar figure at the edge of the crowd. Her mother, Adina. Dressed elegantly as always, she stood apart, a mixture of pride and uncertainty in her eyes. Taking a deep breath, Eugene approached her. "Mom," Adina offered a tentative smile. "This is quite an accomplishment." "Thank you," Eugene replied softly. They stood in awkward silence before Adina spoke again. "I wanted to support you, even if from a distance." Eugene studied her mother, the woman who had caused her so much pain, yet who also shaped her into who she was today. "Why are you here, Mom?" she asked gently. Adina's gaze faltered. "I suppose I wanted to see you, to tell you that I'm proud of you." "Is that all?" Eugene pressed, a hint of vulnerability in her tone. Adina hesitated, her eyes glistening. "And to say that I'm sorry for everything." Eugene's heart skipped a beat. "Do you mean that?" "Yes," Adina whispered, sincerity evident in her voice. "I know I can't change the past, but I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Eugene considered her words, the sincerity stirring something within her. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive, but maybe we can start with a conversation." Adina nodded, relief washing over her features. "I'd like that." They shared a tentative smile, a small step toward healing. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the gathering, Eugene felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Surrounded by community, with the promise of reconciliation on the horizon, she embraced the new chapter unfolding before her. Under a sky ablaze with dawn's first light, the desert stretched out in serene beauty, a stark contrast to the turbulent path Eugene had traversed. Standing on the threshold of a newly built tiny home, she watched as a single mother and her young daughter explored their new abode, smiles lighting up their faces. A sense of fulfillment warmed Eugene's heart, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. As she walked through the cluster of tiny houses nestled amidst the desert flora, she reflected on how far she had come. The community was bustling with life, children playing, women sharing stories, laughter mingling with the gentle whisper of the wind. It was a sanctuary, a place where new beginnings were not just possible but celebrated. Maya approached with 2 cups of iced tea in hand. Thought you could use a refreshment, she said with a warm smile. You're a lifesaver, Eugene replied, accepting the drink gratefully. They sat together on a rustic wooden bench overlooking the settlement. You know, Maya began thoughtfully, what you've created here is nothing short of extraordinary. Eugene gazed out at the horizon, where the sky met the rugged mountains. I couldn't have done it without you and everyone who believed in this vision. Maya nudged her playfully. Give yourself some credit. It was your strength and determination that brought Blessing Homes to life. Eugene chuckled softly. Perhaps, but it was the journey that shaped me, the good and the bad. A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Maya glanced at her. Have you heard from your mother? Eugene sighed, her expression contemplative. She reached out recently. We had a long conversation, probably the most honest one we've ever had. How did it go? It was healing, Eugene admitted. She finally acknowledged the pain she caused. I think she's trying to make amends in her own way. Do you think you'll ever fully forgive her? Eugene took a sip of her tea, considering the question. Forgiveness is a process, but I've realized that holding on to resentment only holds me back. Letting go has given me freedom. Maya smiled approvingly. That's a big step. It is, Eugene agreed. And as for Benji, I've accepted that our paths were meant to diverge. His actions hurt me deeply, but they also pushed me to discover my own strength. As the sun began to set, casting a fiery glow across the sky, Gabriel ran up to them, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Mom, you have to see the garden we planted. Eugene's face lit up. Lead the way, sweetheart. She and Maya followed Gabriel to a patch of land where a group of children and volunteers were tending to budding plants. The sight of new life taking root in the desert soil was symbolic, a testament to resilience and growth. One of the volunteers approached Eugene. The kids are really enjoying this project. It's amazing to see them so engaged. Thank you for your hard work, Eugene replied sincerely. This is exactly what I hoped for, a community where everyone contributes and thrives together. As dusk settled, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Music filled the air and people began to dance, their silhouettes swaying against the backdrop of twilight. Eugene watched with contentment, her heart swelling with gratitude. Maya nudged her gently. Care to join in? Eugene laughed, a lightness in her voice. Why not? They joined the others, laughter and joy enveloping them. For the first time in a long while, Eugene felt whole. The shadows of her past no longer dictated her present. Instead, they served as a reminder of her journey, a journey that led her to discover purpose and fulfillment. Later that evening, as the festivities wound down, Eugene found a moment to herself beneath the vast expanse of stars. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a shimmering ribbon, infinite and full of possibilities. Adina approached quietly, her footsteps soft on the sandy ground. Mind if I join you? Eugene glanced at her mother, noticing the tentative hope in her eyes. Of course. They stood side by side, the silence filled with words unspoken. Finally, Adina broke the silence. This place you've built, it's remarkable. Thank you, Eugene replied softly. Adina took a deep breath. I've made many mistakes, ones that I deeply regret. Seeing you here, surrounded by so much love and positivity, makes me realize how much I've missed. Eugene looked at her, seeing the vulnerability etched on her face. We can't change the past, but we can choose how we move forward. I'd like that, Adina said hopefully, if you're willing. Eugene offered a gentle smile. I'm open to trying. They embraced tentatively at first, then with a warmth that hinted at healing wounds. It wouldn't be easy, and the past wouldn't be forgotten, but it was a start, a step toward rebuilding what was broken. As they parted, Gabriel ran up to them, yawning sleepily. Mom, can we go home now? Yes, darling, Eugene said, scooping him into her arms. Adina watched them with a soft expression. Good night, Eugene. Sleep well. Good night, Mom. Walking back to their cozy home, Eugene felt a profound sense of peace. She tucked Gabriel into bed, his eyelids drooping as he murmured, "Love you, Mom." "I love you too," she whispered, brushing a kiss against his forehead. Settling into her own bed, Eugene reflected on her journey. The pain she had endured was real, the scars a testament to the battles fought. But they also marked her growth, the transformation of a woman who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. Her eyes drifted closed as a gentle breeze rustled the curtains. The future was unwritten, full of endless possibilities, and for the first time in years, Eugene Blessing looked forward to tomorrow with hope and anticipation. She had turned her sorrow into strength, her wounds into wisdom. By helping others, she had healed herself. The homes she built were more than structures. They were foundations for new stories, new beginnings. In the quiet of the night, beneath a canopy of stars, Eugene smiled softly. Her journey had been arduous, but it led her here, to a place of purpose, surrounded by love. And that was a blessing indeed. And there you have it. She turned her deepest pain into a powerful purpose, creating a community that not only healed herself, but also brought hope to so many others. Her journey shows us that even when life knocks us down, we have the strength to rise again stronger than ever. What do you think? Could you find it in your heart to forgive and rebuild like Eugene did? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss an inspiring tale here on Will I Be Happy. Until next time, remember, every setback is a setup for a comeback. Keep believing in yourself and stay happy.